Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, Mr Guyula cannot be here today, but he's asked that I read this speech on his behalf. The events of last week are a tragedy and justice must be served. I send my condolences to the family and community for this loss. It is a great tragedy that someone who has been such a strong and giving community member has been taken from his family and the broader community with such senseless violence. I want to be clear that my position today to not support this bill is not meant to cause any disrespect to the family and the community. But this is not a condolence motion today. These are laws that are being passed that will have a long-lasting effect, and we need to find the best response to it. And I don't believe the government have given enough time to find the best response for the Northern Territory, and the unintended consequences of this bill may be catastrophic. The violence that we are seeing across all our communities, not just here in Darwin or Alice Springs, is something that many elders and leaders are very worried about. This is not part of our culture. It's not who we are. We want to draw on our strong culture so that these people are brought back to a place where they build values of respect and responsibility for community. We want to be able to take action and bring community-led solutions, but we are not the decision makers anymore. Our right to make decisions for our people was stripped from us by the changes that both parties, Labor and the CLP, have made when they have been in government. Labor removed our community councils and federal governments brought the intervention and stronger future, and all governments continue to neglect our homelands. These actions over the past 2 decades have brought us here today. And many of us call this generation the children of the intervention because they have grown up during this time of Aboriginal disempowerment when the government took our authority to make decisions for our people and run our communities. I have spent 8 years talking to deaf governments who do not understand that we need resources on country and we need decision-making power on country so that we can address these problems when they begin. Governments have ignored the problems in our communities, ignored our voices. When we have called for resources for rapery camps to help our kids learn discipline and respect, they've ignored us. When we've called for resources for peacekeepers, they've ignored us. When we have called for genuine local decision-making, they've ignored us. When we've called for genuine two-ways education, they don't understand what this means and they don't consult the communities to understand what Yolngu education is and how our elders can be part of two-ways education. They've ignored us. When we've called for treaty, they've ignored us. I'm speaking in English when I raise these issues, but is this the best language to use? Because it often feels that there is no intention by government to try to understand the meaning of what we are saying. The government needs to stop trying to fix these issues in their departmental offices. They need to come out here on country so we can fix these problems together. Don't just colour in some ideas and make them look pretty. We need to make something that works. Community-led solutions are not easy fixes. They require partnership and they require government to hand over decision-making power to the people. And this is where government has been failing us, and it is by closing the gap is failing. I understand that this Chief Minister has inherited a significant problem that is the creation of many governments before her. But the actions of this government now to look up more and more people in prisons that are already overcrowded, where no rehabilitation programs are taking place, is not going to make anyone safer. It makes us all less safe. Because it is creating hardened criminals, it is building a sense of anger and hurt in our people instead of helping them to find better pathways. The cycle of crime we are experiencing is also shadowed by a cycle of racism. I have told the Parliament that Darwin and all the towns up the highway no longer feel friendly if you're an Aboriginal person. It's sad to say, and I don't want to say it, but racism is growing. I have felt it. In many shops, it no longer feels friendly. Sometimes I am ignored and my wife is ignored and we are not treated as customers, but as a problem. At the United Service petrol station, I was not served fuel without being asked to pay first, even though others around me were able to pump fuel without paying first. Sometimes I'm still wearing my tie from the chamber and I can still be ignored. At a caravan park, a security guard approached my family who were waiting for me to find our cabin and showed them the way to our accommodation, and they were told to leave. This is my experience as an elder, as a leader, as a Yolngu person in Darwin for work, so I know many other Aboriginal people are having these experiences too. And it doesn't make you feel good. I feel upset about being treated differently. This causes great harm and great hurt to all those who feel it. I watched a TikTok clip where the security guards at Karama shops have wheeled an old lady outside the shopping centre to leave her outside. She is an elder, an old lady, and they have removed her from the air conditioning of the shopping centre. For what reason? Security guards all over Darwin are telling people to move on. They are telling them to go away. The message that we hear is that we don't want you to exist. The city, the parks, the suburbs, we don't want you here. That is what they are saying, and that is what this government and the former government is saying when they hire these security guards to move people away from public spaces. I heard about a family group being moved from under the shelter of the community garden building in Palmerston when they had nowhere else to go. I heard about a family being moved off an oval in Tiwi where they were sitting peacefully while the children enjoyed playing on the grass. I also spoke with that family. Mr Deputy Speaker, the poverty and issues that our community face are significant, but we, the communities, need to solve these issues, and we can't do that when the government holds all the resources and all the decision-making power and does not work to include us. The Parliament has been recalled today to pass another round of laws that make bail harder to get. This is a lazy band-aid that at best will cover up a small part of the issue, but it is more likely to make the NT a more unsafe place. The NT News reported that the bail laws from New South Wales saw a 32% increase in prison numbers, and if the proposed bail changes have a similar impact to the New South Wales model, the NT's prison population could swell by an additional 430 people. Where will all these people fit when our prisons are already full and completely failing to help rehabilitate people? What happens when a jail system in crisis collapses? This increase in numbers would mean that the Northern Territory would have the highest incarceration rates of anywhere in the world. And the majority of those people will be First Nations people who will be inside a jail learning a criminal culture. This is not a picture of government success, but a picture of failure, and this is the failure of consecutive governments who have not listened and do not care. I understand why people across the Northern Territory are so upset and have called for tough on crime because they are upset by governments who have not solved problems. Our communities are equally upset with government because they have refused to work with us in partnership so that we can solve problems together. I cannot be in the Parliament this week. I am working from home in Milingimbi while recovering from heart surgery. It was a very hard decision to not come to Parliament today. I want to be there to stand up and show those people who are struggling right now, who feel the racism coming from neo-Nazis booing Welcome to Country at Anzac Day events, through to this government that has already disrespected the Larrakia people through a failure to acknowledge country, and have disrespected all First Nations people by bringing a bill about our sacred sites without seeking to consult with elders and leaders first. I would like to be there today to try and explain to government that their one solution treatment of Aboriginal people, the tough on crime approach that addresses none of the underlying issues, is only making the NT less safe. I would like to be in Parliament today so others know that there are people standing in this chamber who are fighting for all people equally and that we stand together. But I must also prioritise my health so that I can come back in May with a strong and healthy heart. I am lucky that my doctors saw significant blockages to my heart before it was too late. A few years ago, I looked at a map of Australia that showed where potentially avoidable deaths happen. These deaths were most concentrated in northeast Arnhem Land, in the Mulka electorate, and the number one cause of avoidable death was heart attack. When I was in Adelaide being looked after by a very good and caring health team at the Flinders Hospital, the cardiac ward was full of Aboriginal people from the Northern Territory. Each year we lose significant numbers of community members in their 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s from heart attacks or strokes or other avoidable illnesses. These are also significant and avoidable deaths that government can take urgent action on. The domestic violence epidemic here in the Northern Territory has also seen terrible deaths of many women that this government has failed to take urgent action on. Parliament has been recalled this week before a full investigation can be done into the tragedy that unfolded last week, before the situation can be assessed and before we can determine the best course of action to make our community safer. The government is rushing to strengthen bail laws, but maybe they should be rushing to strengthen community-led solutions. Maybe if all governments had done this previously, we would not be seeing full jails and this tragedy. Many members of this parliament have not been given an opportunity to look at the bill before Parliament today. This is not good governance. I agree with government that this is a terrible tragedy and much more must be done to ensure the safety of our communities, all of our communities. But I think the government are not taking full consideration of what needs to happen to truly build safe and healthy communities, and they are not taking the necessary steps to build safe and healthy communities. Their actions are divisive, discriminatory, and do not empower and support self-determination and equality. What happens in our Aboriginal communities now flows elsewhere. Governments have always thought that they could ignore the problems in the bush, ignore the oppression and disempowerment, strip the remote schools of proper funding and two-ways education, starve the homelands of resources, turn a blind eye to poverty and pain, and no one would know. But that hurt and pain is now everywhere. And so we need a government that can work in partnership with our people to build safe and healthy Aboriginal communities so that we can all live in safe, healthy communities together. Let's stand and walk side by side. I do not support this bill that is before the Chamber today. I urge the Government and the Assembly to not pass the most severe bail laws in Australia until more work is done to create strong, rehabilitative pathways through community-led solutions. I thank the member for Johnston for reading this today on my behalf. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'll now read my contribution. As we have all acknowledged in this chamber, the death of Linford Fake is a tragedy that has shaken our community to its core. Like many people here, Linford was pretty much part of my daily life. I went to that shop almost every day, and my heart goes out to him, his family, his wife Margaret, his children Ben and Joe, his grandchildren and all the amazing people who work in that shop. It's a terrible tragedy, and we know and we've heard that Linford was more than just a shop owner. He was a builder of community. He was someone who brought people together, who offered kindness, consistency and care, and who believed in a kinder, more united Northern Territory. As we honour his life, we must face an urgent and painful truth that our community is hurting. People feel unsafe. They feel angry. They're afraid. And they're looking to us, our elected representatives, for direction, for reassurance and for real solutions. We all want safer communities, we all want to prevent harm, and we all share a responsibility to achieve this in ways that are effective, ways that are fair and ways that are lasting. The urgency of this moment is undeniable, but urgency must not override thoughtfulness. Urgent action and wise leadership are not opposites. They must go hand in hand. People deserve to feel safe and to be safe, and that is something we all agree on. But here is what we must also agree on. We can only deliver real, lasting safety if we work together, if we focus on solutions that work, and if we make law with evidence, with community input and with care. Violent crime in the Northern Territory is at crisis levels, and it's touching all of our lives, but it did not come from nowhere. It's rooted in deep and historic disadvantage, in poverty, in intergenerational trauma, in decades of underinvestment. It will not be solved by a single bill or a single media cycle. It will take long-term, mature and calm leadership to fix. So what does it mean to work together? It means coming together in this parliament with a shared purpose to make the best possible decisions we can on the best available evidence for the good of every single Territorian. There are many different lives lived in the Northern Territory, different stories, different struggles, different needs, and we are not here to represent one community at the expense of another. We are here to represent the whole Territory, to make laws that make everyone safe. That means listening to the people who live with the consequences of our policies. It means hearing the voices of the police and the social workers and the families and the frontline staff, of the victims and of the offenders and of the communities most impacted by violence. It means being brave enough to move beyond political point scoring and towards something more meaningful, shared responsibility. We must not just react to pressure. We must respond with clarity, with evidence and care. We are in a moment of crisis, and moments like this test us. They ask us whether we will be guided by fear or by vision. Right now, people are demanding answers, and rightly so. And I want to say clearly, and we have heard in this chamber today, there are solutions. We're not powerless, but we must do what's been shown to work, not rely on action that does not build long-term safety. We know what keeps people safe. We keep people safe when we invest in housing, in education, in mental health services, and in youth programs that offer meaningful support. We keep people safe when we listen to those who understand the complexities of harm and the power of preventing harm, not in theory but in practice. Families, teachers, youth workers, health professionals, Aboriginal organisations, victim advocates, these people have been sounding the alarm for years. Because right now it is absolutely clear that the system is not working. It didn't work for Linford. It didn't work for Declan, and I acknowledge his mum, Samara, here in the chamber today. It didn't work for Roberta. It didn't work for Angela. It didn't work for Sylvia. It didn't work for Sadie. It didn't work for Lena. It didn't work for HD. It didn't work for Jodie, and it hasn't worked for the countless others whose names we have not spoken in this chamber. It hasn't worked for the thousands of people who've gone through our justice system only to reoffend again. In the Northern Territory, 3 in 4 prisoners have been in prison before. That is not a sign of success. That is a sign of a system failing. If we know that homelessness makes someone more likely to commit a crime, then we must reduce homelessness. If we know that incarceration increases the risk of reoffending, then we must stop relying on it as our primary tool. If we know that kids who leave school early are more likely to offend, then we must continue to support those kids to stay engaged, not just find their families into further poverty. If we know that untreated addiction and mental illness contribute to crime, then we must invest in the treatment that actually addresses those issues. None of these are radical ideas. They're just practical solutions, and we could begin implementing them today. Let's listen to Larrakia Nation, whose country we're on, who said, and I quote, "Larrakia Nation does not condone criminal behaviour in any form. Those responsible must be held accountable, and there is no excuse for violence, and it must be met with clear consequences." However, this tragedy again highlights the urgent need for systemic change. For too long, governments are only responding to complex social issues with punitive measures while failing to adequately invest in addressing the root causes: poverty, homelessness, intergenerational trauma and social exclusion. We will not allow the actions of a few to define the many. The overwhelming majority of Aboriginal people live with pride, purpose and cultural responsibility. It is time for all levels of government to partner with us to build a future based on prevention. So let's support those calls, and also starting right now, let's also fund youth programs that divert people away from crime before it happens, expand mental health and addiction services, invest in safe housing and culturally safe trauma-informed care, provide restorative justice and diversion options led by Aboriginal communities, properly support victims and survivors, roll out men's behaviour change programs that address the root cause of domestic and sexual violence, Fund therapeutic courts, including drug and mental health courts, because we know jail does not fix addiction. Invest in Aboriginal liaison officers and Aboriginal community police officers, not private security. Partner properly with Aboriginal community-controlled organisations and meet our Closing the Gap commitments. Introduce bail support programs that help people succeed rather than setting them up to fail. Provide rehabilitation in remand, because most of our prison population is on remand, as we've heard, with no access to support, no programs and no planning. I was very happy to hear the Minister say that that's something that is being looked into. Address domestic, family and sexual violence by implementing the recommendations of the coroner. This is not a wish list. It can be a plan, and it's a plan that we can act on now, because the alternative is to keep doing what we know does not work. We do not have to choose between long-term solutions and immediate action. This is not an either-or situation. We can do both, and we must do both to make the Territory safer. And that brings me to this bill. This Parliament is being asked to vote on legislation which has significant consequences for our justice system and for the Youth Justice Act. I only received a copy of this bill at 10:14 this morning. We've had no time to analyse it. We cannot properly scrutinise or seek advice on a bill we have only received this morning. There's no opportunity to consult our communities about a bill that we have just received. This is not good government. It is not respectful to the communities we represent. It is not responsible, and it is not democratic. Our job is to make informed decisions, to represent our constituents with care and integrity. That requires time, that requires consultation, and that requires transparency. Rushing through laws in the wake of tragedy may feel like action, but it is not the same as leadership. We are not making our communities safer. We are simply delaying the danger. We cannot meet harm with harm and expect healing. We cannot address violence with systems that inflict more violence. We cannot ignore the root causes of this crisis: poverty, racism, homelessness, and the erosion of services that hold our communities together, and expect crime to decrease. And we cannot legislate out of fear. Leadership is not about headlines, it's about doing what works even when it's hard, and the NT has known for decades what works. From the Royal Commission into the protection and detention of children, to the NT Youth Detention Review, to every community consultation and every expert report we've had, we know the answers. We just need the courage to act on them. The truth is, the Territory has been underinvesting in the systems that keep people safe for years. Years of funding cuts to youth services, mental health care and frontline services have left communities exposed. When we strip away supports, we worsen disadvantage, widen inequality, and we drive up crime. If we want safety, we have to rebuild these supports. As my colleague, the member for Kurrama, said, it's a no-brainer. We need leadership that chooses calm over panic, evidence over fear, and community over division. In this Parliament, that leadership starts as us. We're not here as opposing teams. We're here as representatives of the same people, and my people have told me that they expect better. They expect us to lead with integrity, to listen and work together. They expect us to make decisions that are wise and informed and careful, and decisions that are actually going to work. I cannot, in good conscience, vote for or against a bill I have only just received, so I will be abstaining from this vote today. I understand that there are deeply diverse views on this issue, and I have a responsibility to my community to ensure that all perspectives are carefully considered. For the last few days, I've been out talking to many people in my community, and there are many different views, but the strongest message I got was, we want you to go into that Parliament and do your job, and your job is to go in and make careful, considered law, not rush something through that no one has had a chance to work out what its real impact is going to be. So to vote on this without the time and opportunity to assess it properly would be a disservice to those I represent. To my community, I've heard from you that I would not be doing my job if I voted on this today. I've heard from you that it's my responsibility, like all of us in this chamber, to represent you carefully, thoughtfully and with integrity, that my duty is to listen, reflect and then make informed decisions that will serve all of us, not just in the short term, but in ways that will build a safer, more just future for all of us in the Northern Territory. I want to be clear. I am here every day, ready to work with every single member of this chamber and every single person in the Northern Territory to build safer, stronger communities, but I will not trade that responsibility for a headline. Yesterday, my father's consecration was held and I couldn't be there with my family because I was here, fulfilling my responsibility to serve. But I know exactly what he would have said to me. In moments like this, you must stand firm in your values, lead with compassion and act with wisdom and integrity, no matter how hard it is. So that is what I am standing for today. We must honour Linford's life not with rush laws, but by committing together to build a safer, fairer Northern Territory where justice is real, decisions are wise, and every one of us has a chance not just to survive but to thrive, because we choose care, courage and community over fear. Thank you, Madam Speaker.